χρησιμοποιούσαν τη σταύρωση σαν τον πιο ταπεινωτικό τρόπο εκτέλεσης. Πρώτα το θύμα μαστιγωνόταν και μετά καρφωνόταν ζωντανό σε ένα ξύλινο σταυρό.
It's the most important event in history.
What did it feel like?
One weekend that split time into before and after.
What did it look like?
If you believe, it defines your whole existence.
What really happened?
But how much do you really know about the cross?
Any illustrations I saw of the crucifixion were of a fairly placid Jesus looking down in pity from the cross. This was not a pretty picture.
Dr. Carl McCurdy has studied Jesus' crucifixion and has filled in many scientific details that the Bible leaves out.
Jesus allowed himself to suffer, and I couldn't imagine a worse way to die.
Jesus said, "This is your hour, when darkness reigns." Luke 22:52 and 53.
Thursday night, April 6th, 30 AD. Most historians agree this is the date of Jesus' arrest.
Yeah, I believe that Christ's suffering and the demonstration of the kind of physiologic stress that his human body was under is manifested in the Garden of Gethsemane, where it's described that he was sweating blood. And there is a well-documented medical condition in which patients who are under tremendous amount of emotional stress and physiological stress can, in fact, sweat blood, because little blood vessels within the glands burst and then the blood is expressed.
Pilate had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Mark 15:15.
For prisoners sentenced to crucifixion, the first step was flogging. The Romans used a whip called a flagrum. It was specially designed to rip the skin off a prisoner's back.
The person would be tied to some object, maybe a pillar or something, and the individual would be lashed so many times. Scourging was usually done as a prelude to crucifixion. Generally, they only scourged him a few times prior to it because they didn't want him to die beforehand. What they would do is they would take an instrument called a flagrum, which had leather thongs on it, usually 3, with bits of metal or bone at the end. The metal would penetrate the flesh, ripping nerves, blood vessels, and so forth. Generally, the individuals would go into absolute agony, some of them actually to the point of convulsions.
They had it down to an iron. The iron would make bruises, but then these pieces of bone would begin to cut into the skin and the subcutaneous tissue, and actually would result in lacerations all the way down to the muscle. The pain would be intense and unrelenting. The point of the scourging was to bring the victim as close to exhaustion and as close to death as possible before actually taking him to the cross.
Prova stud.
Quale?
Nimmer sto farmo.
Gusta! Gusta!
Quid facis?
Schifamento la magna!
Soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. Then they struck him on the head again and again. Matthew 27, 29, and 30.
Next, for Jesus, a special punishment. The thorns themselves were most likely several inches long and horribly painful.
The face and the scalp have probably the best blood supply of any areas of skin on the body. You also have some of the most nerves, some of the greatest number of nerves in the skin would be on the scalp and the face. Again, intense, sharp pain.
Every time they hit him with the reed as they filed past him and hit against the head and the crown of thorns, these would puncture his scalp.
Στο δέρμα του ανθρώπινου κρανίου υπάρχει ένα δίκτυο από πολύ ευαίσθητα νεύρα.
Now, a crown of thorns would irritate the trigeminal nerve. It's a lancing type of pain across the face, and it may stop suddenly. A wisp of wind may bring the pain on again. The pains are brutal, very difficult to handle, and some people have actually gone to shock and died from trigeminal neuralgia.
Facite. Rosa pulcherrima. Aspicite illum, regem verbum. Ave, rex verbinosus, ave. Homo regalis.
They seized Simon of Cyrene, put the cross on him, and made him carry it. Luke 23:26.
It weighed between 80 and 110 pounds, and knowing that Jesus could not carry what the Romans called the patibulum gives clues about the beating he'd already suffered.
One thing that we see in trauma is that a young person, a person who's in good condition, may be much closer to death than we think from the blood loss. So even though Jesus at this point was stumbling and could remain upright, he was probably very near the edge of total circulatory collapse.
Non palimenta!